Welcome back to the Bootleg Football Podcast. I'm Brett Coleman. That's EJ Snyder. Very shortly, we're going to have Matt Miller with us to talk about the biggest enigmas of the 2025 NFL Draft, the players that nobody can seem to agree on at all whatsoever. EJ, first things first, how are you? Second things second, why can't anybody agree on these guys?
That's a really good question. Maybe not even the three of us in terms of agreement. And I think we'll get some of that in today's pod, which is super fun. But because people see things different ways in draft evaluation, and that's one of the great things about the draft in general, is two people who are both very smart and very knowledgeable, very skilled, can look at the same player and say, I see this. The other person can say, I see the same thing, but I value that differently. Like that means more to me, or I think that will translate better to the pros. And we can have a sort of learned disagreement about that. And that's awesome. We're going to have some of those today. We're also going to have some agreements about, nope, don't see it. And don't believe that guy's going to go as highly as some people think he might.
Well, we're not going to waste any more of your time. Let's get straight to our excellent interview with the great Matt Miller. The great Matt Miller from ESPN joining us to try to parse out some of the more polarizing players in this class. First things first, how are you? Are you surviving during this time of year?
I'm surviving, guys. It's this, as you know, it's such a brutal time of year because especially my role at ESPN, I jump on the desk for day three. So like I'm really trying to nail players 100 through infinity because you have to be prepared for anyone who could possibly be drafted. So that's where I'm at right now, while also navigating. My son made a travel soccer team, so we've got that going on, and like
Let's
the
go.
beauty of weather in the Midwest. But I have to tell you guys, I this morning, so we're recording Friday morning. Yesterday I was on ESPN all day, like that's my job, right? It's normal. And I picked my son up and I was like, hey, in the morning I'm doing a podcast with this really popular YouTube channel. And he was like, oh my God, you finally made it. So like for the 11-year-old crowd out there, like for you guys, like my 11-year-old is psyched that he's going to open YouTube today and see me instead of yesterday when I was just on TV, which he doesn't
Yep.
watch. Like he doesn't watch TV. So this is the biggest performance of my life, according to my fifth grader. So thank you guys for having me.
If it makes you feel better, I also watch you on YouTube when the shows are up on YouTube. So
Right.
it counts, right? It
Yeah.
counts.
As long as you're watching, it's all that matters.
That's right.
Well, obviously, none of the players we're talking about today are going to be day three picks. So I'm going to use this as your opportunity to kind of put your flag in the ground about these guys since you're going to be on the desk in day three. First things first, and this is something that Each and I have talked about multiple times on this show throughout draft season. And that's Jalon Walker and what the hell he actually is. And we did, it was like an awards show, or not an awards show, but it was a show about college award winners and how often those awards actually translate to success, which is when we talked about Jalon Walker because he won Nagurski. And at least I think it was Nagurski. And we got into a discussion about, okay, is he an off-ball linebacker? Is he an edge player? Is he both or is he neither? And I think there's a very fine line between, when talking about these positionless players, there's a fine line between he can play everything and he can almost play everything well enough to have a role, right? And it's like, are you a positionless or do you just not have a position? I think it's one of those is good and one of those is very, very bad. So I'm curious where you come down on Jalon Walker and what side of the coin you think he lands on.
Yeah, guys, I've been doing this a long time, as you know, and it's funny to watch like how it's changed for me as an individual evaluator. To have loved guys like Miles Jack, who was positionless and like a two-way guy before it was cool, and then to love Isaiah Simmons and to learn from that. And then we have guys
Mm-hmm.
like Mika Fitzpatrick to some degree. I not as positionless because you knew he was going to play in the secondary, but like, is he a corner? Is he a safety? Is he a slot? Kyle Hamilton, a little bit the same degree. To watch how that's changed over the past 15 years has been fascinating. And I like to think I've learned lessons from that. I still love Jalon Walker. He's my number 4 or 5 overall player right now. And
Ooh, wow.
yeah, I have him way up there. I have it. Yeah, he's 4. I guess he'd be 4, right behind Ashton Genty, right ahead of Mason Graham. So I'm a huge fan of his. And I say that because I'm with you. Like calling him positionless is fair. And for certain NFL teams, I think that's what he would be. You know, you see what like Jonathan Gannon does with some of his guys, and like he would be a really good fit
Hmm.
there. However, I love him as an edge rusher. And having watched him in the SEC this past year, to watch him, especially against Texas, those two games, he was fantastic. And so he's undersized, and I think that's why a lot of folks have held on to the idea of him as a hybrid slash tweener. I think he's just an edge rusher who's a little bit smaller than what we normally look for at that position. He came in at 243 pounds at the combine. Like that's good for me. And I think even for a guy, like you watch him against Texas and you watch him in the SEC, he has so much violence and power in his game. So I think that's another thing. It's like we have guys who are small, but that doesn't automatically mean that you don't have power. And there are a couple guys in this
Hmm.
class who are like that. I think Jalon Walker has the power in his hands. I think he has the power in his lower body to pop guys. He plays with great leverage. He can bend the corner, like truly bend it. And even his production as a pass rusher, I mean, his pass rush win rate, that's a fun one for me, was almost 15%. And you know, he was a guy who only rushed 170 times last year, but he was like when he was allowed to do it, he did it at a high level. So, and I could be way wrong about this in a couple of years. I think he's one of those guys like we're overthinking it because he
Hmm.
has played some linebacker. It's like, oh, what do we do? It's like, well, what does he do best? He goes, go get the quarterback. Like, be a guy who moves forward. You know, play aggressively. That's the role that I would love for him in the NFL.
Yeah, I see him, and I definitely have some PTSD about former players who you mentioned and players who went to places that they didn't have a plan for. So, my biggest thing with Walker is I very much want him to go to a place where they have a plan and they
Yeah.
understand how to use him. So, like Jiro Avero in Carolina, I think would be great. He understands how to use that profile. I'm with you. I agree that he should be on the edge, not in the middle, because his better reps on tape in college came when he was farther to the outside. Size wise, I looked it up this morning and it's really funny because he compares really, really well. If you're looking on Mock Draftable, which is a great resource, there are four guys that have 90% or better comparison. And Brett, it's one of yours, and Matt, it's one of yours. Junior
Who?
Colson and Jalen Ford.
Oh yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Exactly, right? So it's
Yeah.
a size profile that we typically see as a true inside linebacker who plays better on the edge, which is why I think people, including me, have reservations about it, because if he goes to the wrong place and they go, oh, we're just going to kind of put you wherever, I
Mhm.
feel like he can fall into the same trap that we've seen guys like Isaiah Simmons, who was both taller and faster, fall into, and we don't really know what to do with you. And all those gifts, because he certainly has a ton of gifts, don't get maximized.
Yeah, and that's like one of my favorite things that I do. Shameless plug here. After the draft, I write a piece and it's my 100 favorite picks. And that's kind of my
Yeah.
opportunity to talk about guys once we know where they're going because it does
Hmm.
change the evaluation. It truly
Yes.
does. You know, we're doing this generically for a team that we have kind of made up in our minds of like, oh, I would like this guy on this imaginary created team. So, like, if Jalen Walker goes to the Panthers, I'm going to love him. If he goes
Yes.
to I don't even know if he goes to the Saints, I'm probably not going to like the fit as much, you know, or if he goes to the San Francisco 49ers, it's going to be that conversation of if you're going to put him in a wide nine and tell him just go, I'm going to really like the usage. But if you're going to try to make him be a linebacker on first down and then a defensive end on third, I'm going to start to back up on what that projection is going to look like.
Well, we know he's not going to be a saint because he weighs less than 270 and can
That's
actually
true.
bend. So he's not their type. I want to finish on Walker by asking you this question. I would love for the people watching at home to also answer this in the comments because I think it's going to be a fascinating discussion. If he turns into Andrew Van Ginkel, is that worth 8 overall to Carolina?
In this draft, it might be. Like in this
Mm,
draft, and I think that's another like important, you know, you have to look at the draft that you're in, and I do the
Yes.
same thing. I like, let's compare these guys to last year. That's not fair. I had 20 first round grades last year. I have 13 this year. And so it's, I think you have to live in that context of what is this draft. So and it's also like which year of Andrew Van Ginkel do I get to pick? Do I get last year? Because if it's last
yeah.
year every year, then it's a little bit different, right? So
Yeah.
that is a great question. I can't wait to read what people say. But like in a vacuum, you would say, hell no, not for 8 overall. I want, I need a Pro Bowl player perennially. But in this draft, would a really good starter or solid starter for a bad team like that might be worth the eighth overall pick.
Let's shift over to his teammate, Mykel, who everybody has a very different opinion on. And I feel like he, almost similar to Walker, either a top 10 pick or a day 2 pick, absolutely nothing in between. I think everybody kind of acknowledges the strengths, and I think they acknowledge the weaknesses in the sense that, okay, we have this really long, really strong, dominant run defender. He did play injured all of last year. Early on in his tenure in Georgia, like they promised they were going to move him out to edge full time, and then they just kind of never did. They gave him like one game as a true starting edge throughout his college career, and then the rest of it was like, hey, buddy, you're a 4-eye. Congratulations, right?
Yeah.
And so I think everybody acknowledges the strengths and the weaknesses. It's just people value those strengths and weaknesses wildly differently, even while acknowledging what he is. Where do you come down on Mykel Williams?
I'm not as high on him, and I understand there's some hypocrisy of me believing in the like potential of Jalon Walker if you could extrapolate that pass rush. Like let's give him more than 170 rushes and see what he can become. I do understand there's a little hypocrisy in saying I like that, but I don't like this as much with Mykel Williams. I think with Mykel, like I've been burned by guys as an evaluator where we love the traits and we excuse the lack of production. And I would say we're going to talk about other guys who are just like this. And immediately to my like 2 o'clock here on my desk, I have a sticky note that says draft good football players. And that's my personal reminder to myself to stop getting carried away with shit that doesn't matter. Why does it matter if a guy runs a great 40 or 3 cone if he can't play football? And I'm not saying Mykel Williams can't play football. We've seen him against Texas is a great example of he can play football. But I'm concerned and afraid on the lack of consistency. I think with Jalon Walker, the reason I can separate them is Jalon made an impact no matter where he was at, and it was consistent. And I know I want to give Mykel credit for playing through an injury. That is, it's an impossible thing to do. I just when he was out there, you kind of wanted more every week, and maybe that comes. I see him as more of a project because he did at times just look like an athlete like who didn't really know how to be a pass rusher. And I think Brett, to your point, it's like he never really got comfortable in a spot. And I think we saw that this past year, but God, the flashes are good. So I have him at 22 overall. And I always tell people like there are like 900 players in a draft class. If I have somebody 22, I promise I don't hate them. Like 22 is a really, really good grade from 900 players. Like you got to be very special to be in the top 100 even. So I like Mykel Williams. I don't see him as this player. Like I wouldn't draft him in the top 10. I just think there are too many concerns. And again, maybe this is, just all the experience of seeing guys get overdrafted on traits. And at some point, and I think there is research that backs this up, pass rush production in college is something that translates really well to the NFL. Like if you do it in college at a high level, TFLs, pressures, sacks, that tends to translate. If you don't do it in college, it's very, very rare. Like Daniel Hunter, Chop Robinson last year, like those are the guys that are really outliers in terms of, oh, you didn't have college production, but you found it in the NFL. And with Chop, we'll see. Like it, I mean, I'm encouraged by how he played last year, but that is again, this going back to the sticky note, it's like a reminder to me of like what actually matters, and it's how well these guys play ball and trying not to let a 3 cone time or a vertical jump overcome the fact of, hey, when it's Sunday and it's time to put the shoulder pads on, are you going to be as good as you were on the track in Indy?
Yeah, and I think with Mykel, exactly what you said in terms of the ranking and where is very important. And what you said about the first player we talked about in this draft is also very important in terms of, yes, he has size. He played at a good program. He has flashes. It's not that he doesn't know how to play football. It's that he doesn't do it all the time. So if he gets drafted later on, I think it's better for him because he will go to a place where there's not instant expectation that he is the guy. He can get healthy, he can get familiar with the position, and then we can see if he's one of those guys that picks up some production. But if you pick him in the top 15, that's not going to happen. They're going to shove him right into the lineup. He's not probably going to get double-digit sacks as a rookie, and everybody's going to go bust, which I hate, but it is going to happen. And that is the weight that comes even in this year's draft where there's not a lot of first-round grades. If you pick a guy like that up high, the expectations are sky high, and I don't think that's going to be the best thing for him long-term in the NFL because I like him. I don't love him, but I like him more than some other traits-based players in this draft who are worse football players.
I agree.
That's where I come down, is you see a little bit more, so you go, at least there's a chance for me, whereas there are other, I would say, almost purely traits-based players in this draft that I am not behind for all the reasons that you mentioned.
And I would say, like, and I should have mentioned this with Jalon Walker. With Jalon, I feel very convicted because people at Georgia talk about him like he can run for president and win. You know, like he's such a, which maybe that's not a good analogy anymore. Like he could.
Jalen, what's your tariff policy?
Right,
How about
yeah,
that?
right. He's big on reciprocal tariffs. I think with Jalen, like you love the character so much and how hard he plays that you have belief in his upside. And with Mykel, you do hear some of the same things of like, this is just a good kid. Like this is a great kid. Everyone loves him. So you don't have concerns about, oh, he's going to get to the league and like that's good enough for him. And you do hear that about players of like, hey, all they care about is they made it to the NFL. Anything after that's gravy. You know, like they're just happy to be there and to say they played in the NFL. With both these guys from Georgia, I do get that sense that like they want to be great. Like they are hungry to be good football players and they're both going to work really hard to get better.
So what you're saying is he's a Philadelphia Eagle. He just doesn't know it yet.
I think so. I mean, probably. I think in my 7-round mock, I had him going to Kansas City. And it was like, if he's, and to EJ's point, if he slips a little bit, it's going to suck on Thursday night for him. But ultimately, it's going to be the best thing in the world. Like, imagine if he's a Buffalo Bill or an Eagle or a Chief, like even a Raven, like just one of those teams that they know how to develop players. And you're going to be a number 3 pass rusher for a year and you're going to learn from somebody. And then, before you know it, you're going to have, a very long, successful career.
One quick pause, but if you're enjoying this content so far, we have a lot more waiting for you over on the Bootleg Football Patreon. It's available to all tiers. We have bonus episodes on value DTs in this class, value linebackers, value receivers. We have in-depth breakdowns on Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. And of course, our top 10 position rankings are going to be posted right before the draft as well. So if you want more from us, check out our Patreon at the link in the description below or at the QR code on the screen. Now, let's get back to it. I want to take the opportunity to show over to Shemar Stewart, who's in this same general category of incredible athlete, didn't really produce, and had, quite frankly, a roller coaster ride as far as the tape evaluation, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel even worse about Shemar than I do on Mykel. And he's a better athlete than Mykel, but he's a worse football player in my opinion. And I don't know if it's because he's another one of these like freak athletes that never really had to develop because he's a freak athlete, but he kind of doesn't know what he's doing at all as a pass rusher. And that bothers me. Like he had 13 reps against a combination of Will Campbell and Armand Membu on true pass sets, meaning it wasn't just a 3-man rush. He was lined up as a true edge, like a 5 technique or wider, no RPO, no screen, no play action, time to throw over 2 seconds. Like we're talking every possible ingredient you can have to get an advantage of a pass rusher. And you typically only get about 6 to 8 of those per game as a pass rusher. He had 13 combined of those against Campbell and Membu. And he sort of won one of them. And it was a hurry on Membu, no sacks, no QB hits, got absolutely nothing done against Campbell, despite having every athletic advantage you can pretty much have, right, in terms of length and size and power and burst and all that kind of stuff. He just doesn't know what he's doing. And I respect that he's a good run defender. I totally get that. But how do I take that in the top 10 when I'm a GM of a team who's bad enough to be in the top 10 and I'm expecting him to come in and beat, Andrew Thomas or Laramie Tunsil when he couldn't beat Will Campbell? Like, what do I do with him?
I have a hard time with him as well. And he is the reason for the draft good football player sticky note because of the hype, right? I mean, we all know that he had 1.5 sacks each of the last 3 seasons. And that doesn't even begin to paint the picture. Like he wasn't an impact. And I know he had 26 pressures, like that's kind of his calling card. Like he got into the backfield a little bit, but I wasn't impressed. And I think he's confusing as well because number one, what is he? Because he's been everything from 290 pounds to 267 pounds. So it's like, okay,
Hmm.
number one, what are you? Are you a five technique? Are you a three technique? Are you a six technique? Are you like who are you trying to be with this weight variance that is just wild? And to your point, he is a great athlete. The workout, it looks like Miles Garrett from an athletic
Hmm.
standpoint, but none of the football ability. And as you start talking about him, Brett, I was thinking it's like he's an athlete, not a football player, because he doesn't
Yeah.
have a pass rush plan. He doesn't know how to use his hands. He doesn't know how to set up moves. And I think like even at the Senior Bowl, the limited amount of time we got to see him at the Senior Bowl, I was even it's like, okay, man, he pops. He there's a lot of burst, but there's no plan. It's either all power or all gas, and there's no mix and match of that. It's so he is a project through and through, and that's okay. Like he is a world class athlete. What I think his RAS was a perfect 10 out of 10, which speaks to just
I
how
think so. Yeah.
like the length and the power and the burst. It's amazing, but he has to go somewhere where they have a good defensive line coach that can work with him, and he has to buy into that. He has to want to learn. Otherwise, he will flame out pretty quickly because you can't survive in the NFL with just speed. You have to have it. I personally think you have to have power to survive as a pass rusher in the NFL. And if you have speed, that's great. Like you have to have power because everyone's so strong. That's just not a common component to his game, especially if he's going to try to play at 267, 270 in that range. So I have hope for him just because you want to see everyone succeed. But of the round one pass rushers, he's the one I have the biggest concerns about. And he is like of the five who are commonly considered first round guys, Abdul Carter, Jalen Walker, Mike Green, and then the two that we've talked about here. He's 5 out of 5 for me with those guys, even given the concerns about Mykel with the injury and the not great pro day times, and even with Mike Green with the transfer and the lack of great size. Like I still feel better about where those guys are at as players.
Yeah, Shemar Stewart is one I struggle with deeply, and he was absolutely somebody I was referencing when we were talking about Mykel in terms of he is a tremendous athlete, even a better athlete than anybody we've talked about so far. But as a football player, he is incredibly limited, and I think a lot of people who didn't watch his team last year just gloss over that because they look at the physical comparison and they say, well, he's got to be. And he's not when you get into the tape. And if Shemar Stewart becomes a great pass rusher, because I too would love to see that, it would be a lot of fun. It would be very much like Josh Allen becoming one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL after his college, where he showed a ton of traits, but not a lot of the numbers that people look for in terms of consistency. Some EPA, completion percentage, all those things were much lower than a typical NFL starter, much less a top flight NFL starter. And it took him a while to get there. He's absolutely there, but like he's the only one like in history that came from that profile and became that good. Shemar Stewart wouldn't be the only one in history, but he would be one of a handful. So I'm not touching him in the top 25 picks. And yeah, I
Agreed.
need a defensive line coach that completely buys in and knows what they're getting, which is a great athlete who are there pretty much going to have to build the plan from the ground up. And the player, like you said, has to buy in, and we're not going to know that either. But all of that adds up to who I'm going to let somebody else take that chance. I think it was Ben Solak this year that just said, there are guys in the draft that I'm going to let somebody else take the chance on. He
Yep.
is like public enemy number one on that board for me this year, where I'm just like, shoo, somebody else picked him.
And that's a
Yeah. And if
great
they're
point.
right, good for them.
Yeah.
Exactly, right? And that's such a good point. And I think that you see that play out in like in each of us that do big boards and rankings. Like you see our guys that we're like, I'm good. Like I'm okay with that. And there are players that I love that you guys are probably like, no, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll let someone else. And I feel that way about outliers in general. Like even, before Tez Johnson ran at the combine, he was one of those guys where I was like, I'm happy to be wrong about him. If he makes it at 154 pounds, I'm happy to be wrong about him. But I do think we all have those. I always use the amusement park analogy. You know how when you go to ride a roller coaster as a kid and there's a sign, it's like you gotta be this tall. Like we all have those
Hmm.
things that you have to
Yep.
be here for me, or you don't get to ride. And for me, I think pass rush production is one of those things. So it does get difficult with guys like Shamar Stewart.
Is arm length for offensive line one of your, to borrow your roller coaster analogy, you must be this long to ride? Probably a good way to transition to Will Campbell because, well, I will preface by saying we don't know actually what his real arm length is
Right.
because apparently they grew half an inch between combine and pro day. But let's just say LSU, the pro day was correct and he's 33 flat. Does that meet your threshold, or do you even have a threshold for length for an offensive lineman?
I do, and also you guys are so damn good at your jobs because that was a beautiful segue. Like as someone who's done
Hey, you set me up
podcasts and
for it, man.
TV and everything, that was really good. I hope people appreciate how good that was. I think I do. Like I would say 33 is my threshold, and it used to be 34, but I think
Mhm.
33 has become the norm. Um, I'm not worried about Will Campbell's arm length. I think there are times on tape it shows up where he lets guys get into his chest a little bit, but for folks watching us on YouTube, you could probably tell by my frame, I've never played offensive line. So what I do is I talk to people who have. I go with you guys to O-line masterminds, and I talk to Duke Manyweather, and I talk to Jeff Schwartz, and guys who have done it, and have studied it and coached it. And what I've learned over the years is to be an offensive lineman, quickness covers up a lot. And it's almost like playing basketball where you have to have that reactive quickness or recovery agility. And I think Will Campbell's recovery agility is elite. I think he's a fantastic mover. My bigger issue with Will Campbell is his stance because he looks like Ashton Genty playing left tackle with the way he's standing almost straight up and down. Like that's my issue is his stance. That's going to have to get cleaned up. But he's working with Duke Manyweather, who I think is the best offensive line coach not employed by the NFL, and he's going to get him cleaned up. And so I don't have those concerns about arm length because I think the quickness covers it. And if he were a player who had 32.5-inch arms and didn't have elite quickness, then I think we would have a concern. But just like for any position, you're going to have strengths and weaknesses. And I think the key is do your strength cover those weaknesses, or can you mask those weaknesses with what you're strong at? Will Campbell's best asset is his agility. And so to me, that's where I get comfort in the fact that he can cover up, a little bit short armed with that. I think the wingspan is a bigger issue than the just pure arm length, if we're being honest, because I think that speaks to his just girth and his ability to take up space and control guys. But I think his quickness is fantastic. And this is not a hedge, but like it does depend to some degree, like where he goes and what is asked of him. I
Hmm.
think if you're a team running straight zone, like you're going to absolutely love Will Campbell because of the movement he's going to give you in the run game, and if you have a mobile quarterback, you're probably going to really like Will Campbell because he's going to be able to cut off on the backside if he's playing left tackle. But if you just want somebody to rock on and put guys in the dirt every play, that's not really what he does. So I think it's knowing your scheme as a coach and as a GM and as a scout and saying like, hey, this guy works for us. So I'm a Will Campbell fan, especially the person. Every time I hear him speak, I've become a bigger fan of his. He gets it. And I love the maturity and like his love of the game comes through. And again, those are the guys like I'm gonna buy in on you if I can talk to you or hear you speak and feel about your love of the game, like that gets me pretty excited about players.
I think Will's an easier projection to the league than the players we've talked about so far because he is very good at football for one, and two, he's got a very defined role, and that role is very important in the NFL. He is an elite pass protecting left tackle,
Mhm.
and those guys make money. And, I'm with you on the stance. It's odd. I don't know if he'll change it. He doesn't really have to for the most part because he can get that done right now. I do have reservations, not only about some of the pass rush win rate stuff. Like people talk about Will Campbell like he never got beat. He did get beat.
Yeah.
Most players get beat. He didn't get beat a lot, but he did get beat. And the run stuff is very specific. He has very strong arms, great grip. Like you said, his quickness and his movement, his ability to cut off the backside, that all translates to zone really, really well. My problem is a lot of people saying, oh, well, we have a left tackle, so we're going to take Will Campbell. We're going to make him a guard for a year. And I'm like, whoa, okay,
Yeah.
whoa. We just crossed over a threshold that with a lot of guys I don't worry about, but with Will Campbell specifically, with the stance and the lack of that power to root guys out who are, bigger than him, and, use their leverage in a way every play that's very difficult. Like, I'm not sure that's going to work at all. So if you want to take Will Campbell, plop him on the left side and say, protect my quarterbacks, typically blind side, I'm cool with it because he's got a demonstrated ability to do that at a very high level and skills that translate very, very well for that. So I'm okay with that. You want to do other things with him? You want to make him a power blocking left tackle or a guard? Ooh, I think we just crossed over a threshold where I get a lot more nervous. So the niche is there. It's important for the NFL. Lots of people need it. I think he plugs in very well to that. Outside of that, I have questions. That's where the sort of hair on the back of my neck stands up a little bit.
Please don't let him play guard for like Bryce Young. It's like he's too tall and he's too upright. Like it's a recipe for disaster. But EJ, I've made that same point. If he's going to play guard, we got to see the stance completely changed, which maybe it will be, right? But
Maybe.
I've also heard guys talk about it's like a batting stance. Like, why mess with it if it works? If it works, don't mess with it.
Exactly.
So it'll be kind of fun
That's what
to
Duke
watch
says.
that.
Duke has been beating that drum the entire time of like, it's what he's comfortable doing. I'm not going to make him uncomfortable because he's a good player when he's comfortable. Now, we'll see if the offensive line coach at his future destination agrees with that.
Yeah.
Because some teams are like, no, we need to get you in a 3-point stance because that's how we run the ball. You get in a 3-point stance and you fire off and you like, I don't know. Every team's going to have them graded differently. Matt, I do want to get your thoughts on this though, because this had occurred to me over this past week when I was doing my recheck on Campbell to get ready for the show. And I'd been really struggling to come up with a comp for him because, again, he's just a very different kind of player, which is why he's very polarizing. And I actually settled on somebody who years ago when he was coming out, I thought was a first-round tackle / first-round center that ended up going on day 3 for whatever reason. And that's Zach Tom. What are your thoughts? Just because of how athletic Campbell is, maybe he's not a guard if you want to move him inside and you already have tackle. Maybe he's a center because I think a lot of teams look at the athleticism and how he operates in space and how quickly he can reach guys. And like, I kind of feel like if you're already set at tackle and you just want to get him on the field, you put him at center because he could be like a Tyler Linderbaum type guy.
Yeah, I actually thought you were going to say Cody Whitehair when you started talking about college tackle and play center. I was like,
Maybe.
Cody Whitehair? Like, wow. You know what's funny, bro? I actually had someone early in the year tell me that. Like, they were like, right when the arm length stuff became a thing in like September, I did talk to a scout who said, "Do you think Will Campbell could be a center?" And my first response was, "Not with that stance," because I was so fixated on the stance early in the year, it really bothered me. But if you're going to move him to guard, I do think he's absolutely like. I want centers who are probably the smartest guy I've ever met, and he fits that. Just he gets it and he understands football so well. I could see it, and it's funny. Like you guys know, I grew up a huge Niners fan, and I have a love-hate relationship with that team because of how they draft. But I would love Will Campbell as a left tackle for Kyle Shanahan. Like I think that's an ideal fit for him. But if you're going to tell me that he could play center in San Francisco as well, like I would be equally happy with that because again, of the agility, he would be so good from that position, especially in that type of scheme.
So I think we're all in agreement here. He's a tackle until he's not, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
For me, yes.
Yeah.
So we'll just have to see where he goes, and I think that's going to tell us how his future team saw it then. Because if he gets drafted to a place that already has tackle set, congratulations, buddy, you're an interior offensive lineman.
Right.
Just kind of how it is, right? Shifting out of the trenches, because I think we've done all trench players so far. There is one skill position player. Well, EJ hates when I say that because it does take skill to play in the trenches. How about this? There's one quote-unquote smaller player that is also very, very polarizing. And I'm not sure I expected him to be going into the season, but as we've gotten into draft season, he's turned into a polarizing player, I think, as people have kind of dug in more on the tape. And that's Tetairoa McMillan. He was seen as like runaway. Let's just take Travis Hunter out of it because Travis Hunter is his own thing. As far as pure receivers go, he was seen as runaway wide receiver 1 in this class until we got to January, right? And then it was, okay, well, let's revisit Luther Burden. We really like Emeka. Man, this Matthew Golden kid's really good in the playoff run he went on. And all of a sudden, you throw me in there too, with all my Iowa State propaganda for Jaden Higgins.
Yeah.
All of a sudden we get to a situation where a lot of people are starting to think, is T-Mac number 3 in this class, maybe even number 4 in this class? And you still have the ardent supporters that are like, no, he's going to the Patriots at 4. And then you got, our mutual friend DJ, who's like, he could slide all the way to 22 with the Chargers. Where are you on McMillan? And is he one of your top 2 receivers in this class?
So he is not one of my top 2 receivers, and he has not been all season. He has not been. I am Travis Hunter. Obviously, is a unicorn. He's crazy. But I'm a Luther Burden guy, and I have been for like 3 years. I haven't seen or heard anything to change my Luther Burden stance. And with McMillan, it's funny because he fits what I would consider my type at receiver. Like I love big receivers. I always have. Going back to my career starting with my love for Alshon Jeffrey, and then I was Michael Thomas's guy and I was AJ Brown's guy. And like, I love big receivers, but with McMillan, and I don't know if anyone will get this. Like when you watch as much football as we do, it's like sometimes you watch a player and you just want more. And I know that's not analytical. And it's like, there's nothing that I could pull up a stat and say, well, it's because of this, guys. When I watched McMillan this year, I just wanted more. And I liked his 2023 tape quite a bit better. And I think you could assign some of that to Jed Fish being gone and Noah Fafita didn't play as well this year. Like there could be some legitimate reasons for that. But I just didn't think he had as much like he didn't play with as much violence. He didn't have as much burst. And we saw some drops pop up this year that hadn't been an issue before. And then, I never expected him to be fast, but 4.55 at the pro day, this probably about a 4.6 at the combine. Like that's even, I think, a little substandard for his size, like excluding the fact that he's 6'4", 219. Like I would prefer him to be a little quicker than that. And it shows up with the contested catches. And it shows up with that he's quicker than fast. We'll say that, oh, he's not that fast, and someone's going to show us a clip of him making a guy miss. He's quick, but he doesn't have very good long speed. And I think that does get parsed out in the numbers. It gets parsed out in the tape. So I have him as the 4th receiver in this class. And that's been pretty consistent for me. I did jump Matthew Golden because of the run that he had in the college football playoffs. As soon as he declared, it was like, okay, wide receiver 3 for me. So for me with McMillan, it's not that I saw something this year and moved him down. It was more so like I didn't see anything to move him up really. And so he's sitting about 19 or 20 on my big board. And I'm sure there were times in the year he's floated up a little bit, but he's been pretty consistently in that range for me.
Yeah, I think Tet's a guy that, again, had he had a profile, and everybody had that in their mind coming in. It reminds me of like preseason college rankings, right? Well, they're the number 1 team. Well, they've lost the first 3 weeks, so they're not the number 1 team anymore. Yeah. And he didn't lose that much, but people just had this opinion of him, and that's always difficult to sort of play against. And we see this all the time doing what we do, that players have a better, Luther Burden's a perfect example. He had a better last year than he did this year. There's a lot of reasons for that. But as you go back to the tape on Ted, I think we overthink it. And people started to shove him out of the first round and ended up having him way down the board. I was like, okay. Hang on. We still have a tall guy that runs routes really well, that has a 60% contested catch rate, even though it's down a little bit this year. And yes, he does manufacture some of those himself. He runs himself into those or can't run away from them, as you said. But 2.87 yards per route run is a very solid stat. A very good ability to beat man coverage, which is one of my key indicators for is a receiver going to be able to translate to the pros, right? A lot of guys were talking about their ability to beat man coverage is not as good. It's middle of the pack, and they are going to struggle when they get to the NFL because they're going to see more man. Ted is big enough and strong enough to win in those situations, not necessarily at that elite level, but I'm not putting him out of the first round, again, from anything I saw. He's not my number 1 receiver, nor has he ever been, but he is up in a very similar position to where he is on your board. And I think that's good. He is a first-round receiver. I do not hate Ted McMillan. I think if anything, was telling people to put on the brakes, like when they were like, oh, he's going to slide. I was like, look, if he runs a 4.75, yeah, sure, he's going to slide. Other than that, you've seen what you've seen on tape, and it's pretty darn good and useful translating to the NFL. So I think he's fine. I think he goes sometime from the middle of round 1. I mean, sure, he could go to the Patriots, but I don't think that's the most likely choice. Probably goes in the middle of round 1 before pick 25, somewhere in there. And I think that's a great spot for him. And I think he'll perform again in this draft class, in this year, to that status. And folks will be happy where he goes. He's a good player.
He is a good player, and I think like his range. I sure like you guys get these calls too. Agents will be like, "Hey, what's the range on my guy?" So we can kind of talk to them about it. And those are always fun conversations because no one likes to hear your opinion at that time. But for McMillan, it's like, and I don't know who his agent is yet. I might learn in the next 20 days. But if his agent were to call me, I'd be like, "Buddy, I think it's from like 4 to 32." Like I don't, and I know that sucks. Like I would love to give you more of like a 5 pick range, but his range is all over the place because it takes one team. And if we're
Mhm.
sitting there in Green Bay and the Raiders take him at 6, I'm gonna be like, yep, they need an X. They have no one out there. You have to get a big body for Gino. Like it makes sense. So it's if he goes 6, I will completely understand it. And if he
Mhm.
falls to Buffalo, I'll kind of understand that too. So he is a fascinating player, and does go back to that. Like if you were scouting for a team, you would be able to evaluate him for a specific role and be able
Right.
to speak more intelligently about how he fits and where his range might be. But for us who are doing this somewhat generically, it's man, he is a tough eval because I think he's gonna be a really good number 2 receiver, and that's
Mhm.
great. Like there's those guys make like 30 to $35 million a year. I don't want to put the stamp on him of like he's Drake London, because and I don't even know that Drake London has been what we wanted Drake London to be. So it's tough.
Tetairoa McMillan, to me, my biggest problem is the first 10 yards of every route he runs.
Yeah,
And
what is that, by the way? Yeah,
I
yeah,
know that's the thing is like
yeah.
I've asked like 5, 6 people about it, and I'm like, what's the deal here? Like, why does he run vertical routes like he's running a choice route 5 yards past the line of scrimmage? He doesn't drive off the ball basically ever. He slow plays every release in the first 10 yards, and it's almost like he's trying to make the corner think he's moving slower than he is, which
Yep.
it's like you're just moving slow at this
It
point.
kind
Then
of
he tries
works.
to turn on the gas, right? It does
Yeah.
work. I'll give him that. It
Yeah.
does work. But like this whole, I'm not going to turn on the gas until I get 12 yards deep. It doesn't work in the NFL. Like you got to go. Like
Yep.
you got to go immediately. And like DeAndre Hopkins ran 4.57, but his first 10 yards, the drive phase of the route was elite burst. And that's how he was still able to win vertically because you win 30 yards down the field by winning the first 10 yards
Yep.
down the field, right? Because you're fighting for body positioning. And when he kind of concedes body positioning by just slow playing every single release, it pisses me off because he should be way better than he is.
Yep.
And I know it's in there. Like we see it when he turns it on in yards after catch opportunities because he actually
Mhm.
is a really good yak threat for being a big
Yeah,
guy.
he
We
really
see
is.
the burst. It's there. He just doesn't do it, right? And like I love that he has great zone feel. Like he's a quarterback's best friend in terms of how he's constantly putting himself between the DB and the ball. Like I think he's really good against zone coverage. Again, I think he's great after the catch. But like you mentioned, I think he's an X receiver. In theory, yeah, but he doesn't do the X receiver stuff, which is get the fuck down the field, dude. Like it's so annoying to me, which is why I think if he goes at 4 to the Patriots, like day number 1, they need to get him, with Drake, and Drake needs to be like, I need you to run, and I need you to
Yeah.
run every single play, or I'm not throwing you the ball.
I was just having PTSD about Quentin Johnston as you were talking about that. It was like, oh God. It was like, what if this is Quentin Johnston all over again? But I'm with you. And that's why I like the 23 tape because I thought he played with more urgency. And
Yeah.
you see the yak stuff because they were getting him like slip screens and stuff. And he can do some stuff with the ball in his hands. But
Yeah.
and I think and I'm like the world's biggest fan of NIL. Like it's way overdue. I love it, but I do think that we see more business decisions from college guys now, where they're like, you know what,
Yes.
I'm waiting for the NFL on this. And Will Johnson's one of my favorite players in this class. Will is like the poster child for business decisions this year, right? But I still love him because my idea is like, oh, when he gets in the NFL, he'll turn it back on, and it might be the same thing for Tet, where it's like get in the NFL and you're gonna run your ass off. But we just didn't always see it this past year.
There was a theory floated to me about the structure of the Derek Stingley contract, where the reason why they did 3 years and the reason why it was structured the way it was was so that he would never ever take his foot on the gas, because he's going to have to renegotiate that thing after the first 2 years anyway for another
Pretty
extension.
smart.
And I was kind of thinking about it. I was like, we've actually seen a rise in 3-year deals, not just because the cap is scaling so quickly that deals become outdated, faster now, but also it puts the carrot on a shorter stick, for some of these players. And I almost feel like, not to say it's a way to keep guys engaged, because you're making $30 million. You're still going to be generationally wealthy anyway. But if you know that you're basically consistently going to be on 2-year deals for the rest of your career, not to go on a tangent, I would play harder. I don't know about you guys. I would.
I'm just
contract years come up more often. That's for sure.
I'm just not realizing ESPN always signs me to 3-year deals. Is this why? Is this what it is? Like, to keep me
That's
going.
right.
On Bleacher Report, it was 2-year deals. So I think there's some truth to this, right? It's like
See, your
they wanna
scouting
keep that
report
carrot.
is trailing after you. This is your draft scouting notes following you throughout your career. Gotta keep the stove hot for Matt.
That's terrifying if that's true.
You're going to go to FS1, then they're going to tag you. So have fun with that.
Hopefully I'm sticking right where I'm at.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time. We got about 40 minutes out of you during the busiest time of your year. So, massive, massive thank you for doing that. We know you're splitting time between ESPN and dad duty and, podcast appearances like this one. So I think I owe you several beers next time I see you at an all-star event or combine or something like that.
O-line Masterminds can't get here soon enough. I'll be looking forward to it so we can all hang out again soon. But no, I appreciate you guys. You both know I'm such huge fans of you as content creators, as people. So this is truly an honor for me to get to come and just hang out with you guys for a little bit.
I'll see you this summer.
Yep.
All right, fun show today. Thank you once again to Matt for coming by. We're going to get out of here, but before we do, I want to thank all of our executive producers over on the Patreon once again for helping to make this show and every show possible. Fitzy, Connor, Eichen, Liam, and Mike. Love all you boys and all the contributions you've made to our show over the years. It really does add up, and we really are appreciative. For everybody else who also is a patron, reminder, we have a bunch of bonus content over on the Patreon. We just dropped our defensive tackle, like our value defensive tackle episode, I should say. We have a linebacker episode, a receiver episode. We broke down the Michigan DTs in detail. So a bunch of stuff over on the Patreon, whether you're an EP or not. All that is waiting for you. So once again, thank you to all the patrons. Thank you to Underdog. Thank you to any sponsor we have that's made this show possible. We'll be back very soon with something else entirely.